Welcome to my video for the best war games that I played in 2014. Before I proceed any further, I need to give you some parameters and criteria so that you have a sense of how to interpret what you're going to see next. Differently from other best of 2014, I'm not going to tell you necessarily about the best games that came out that year that I played. Because sometimes there are games that I played in 2014 and they were released early. I'm like, oh no, but the rules say that I only can talk about games that were published this year. Too bad I can talk about that, this or that jam. What rules? I make up whatever rules I want. So in my video review today, in my video compilation, I'm going to tell about my favorite games that I played in 2014, that I discovered in 2014, even if they have been published earlier than that. War games. What is a war game? What's in a name? Is it a war game less war gamey by any other name? Is it less fun if you call it in other names? Like if you call it onion or carrot or car or rhinoceros? I don't care. There are so many debates about what a war game is. I have my own scientific, infallible, highly objective definition of what a war game is. Take something, pick up something to write it down, make a note so that in the future you have the reference there, you can show it to your children to enlighten them. What is a war game? A war game is a game that when I play it, I feel like I'm playing a war game. I know it's a lot to take in, let it sink in, the wisdom may not strike you at first, but it will come to you. One morning you'll be like brushing your teeth and you'll be like, oh my gosh, I get it now. For now, let's move on and let me tell about the best war games that I played and discovered in 2014. Number 10, which seems like the bottom line, the bottom of the list, but it means that there are so many games that are underneath. It is still one of the best ones that I played this year, is Hold Fast. Hold Fast by Worthington Games. Worthington Games is a publisher that I find very unpredictable. There are game publishers that have more of a standard. They know more or less what to expect. From them, it can be a disaster, it can be a gem. Hold Fast, luckily enough, belongs to the second category, to the latter. Hold Fast is a little gem. It is a game about the Barbarossa campaign. You're like, boring again. Yes, but this is done differently from the other ones. It is an extremely economic, minimalistic, synthetic design. It is a block game, so you have the fog of war because the blocks that represent the units will be facing the owning player. But at the same time is one that miraculously enough you can play also in solitaire if you just place the blocks face up and you play both sides at the best of your possibilities. It works. I like block games in general. Recently I haven't played any great block games with the exception of this one. Just like how blocks give you the possibility of recording a lot of information about the status of the units without having to worry about counters and tables and writing down notes. The block itself holds the information. And Hold Fast is incredible in what it achieves, in the amazing discrepancy between the simplicity of the rules. It's like 4 pages of rules. You think, what is this, a postcard game? And yet it somehow gives you a sense of the largest military operation in human history. It gives you a flavor, it gives you more than a hint, I would say. It gives you the general narrative. Of course, it is not like reading a multi-tome version of the event. It's more like reading a short introductory manual that tells you about all the main facts, but all the main facts are definitely there. As you're playing the game, you will find yourself walking the same paths that the historical commanders had to walk, making the same decisions, or I should say, facing the same challenges, and then you had to choose whether you want to make the same decisions, try different strategies. Fun, exciting, and to me a miracle in minimalistic design. Hold Fast by Worthington Games. I don't often play games about the Barbarossa campaign where I can play the entire campaign in an evening, I can thanks to Holdfast. Number 9, Blood and Roses. Blood and Roses, the latest installment in the Men of Iron Infidel system. I guess now we have to call it Men of Iron Infidel Blood and Roses, because I'm not sure it has a name, so we usually refer to it just by the name of some of the games in the system. A system to simulate medieval combat, a system that is not maybe exactly entryway, a little more advanced at entryway level, but still relatively low complexity. A system that has an interesting system of activation in which leaders activate individually, and you may have a side that manages to activate a string of leaders before the other side manages to steal initiative. A system that takes into account the quality of the arms and how different types of weapons interact when they clash, range combat, all of the good things that you expect from medieval combat. Now, I played my share of medieval games, but there are two main systems of which I played some games consistently. One is this one, in which I played 3 games, and the other one is a French system called By the Edge of the Sword. Frankly, I prefer that system slightly overall because of the mechanics, because it seems to me that it managed to give you an extra level of detail and chrome without increasing the complexity. You have a little bit more without much more effort. Also, there are more battles that are available in that system. But why am I mentioning Blood and Roses then instead of a module in that game? Because as a single package, Blood and Roses is excellent. It has a very high return for your money. There are a ton of battles. The topic is the War of the Roses, which is a topic that actually I haven't gained much, with the exception of Columbia's Richard III and maybe 1 or 2 others that I can't recall right now. It's not a topic that I gained a lot. It was nice to get to learn the topic better through the many battles that are available here. So the system is good. It is my second favorite system for medieval combat, and when it comes to the Men of Iron, Infidel, Blood and Roses system, Blood and Roses definitely is an excellent new installment. Blood and Roses, like Men of Iron and Infidel by GMT. Another GMT game is the next one. Hoplite, at least a recent installment in the Great Battles of History system. 2014 has been a special year for me because I finally got to play this game system that I've heard so much about, I've read so much about, I know it's a classic. Maybe it took me so long to get started precisely because one of those cases in which you have to choose between being ridiculously, embarrassingly late to the party or not attending the party at all. Sometimes it looks classy if you just pretend like you don't care about the party. But I wanted to try the system, so I decided to play it anyways. I knew that the system was pretty complex, so I started from the simpler version. It is possible to play the game with a manual that simplifies things for neophytes or for people that simply want to have a more streamlined experience. And that is called Great Battles of History. So first I picked up the manual early on in the year. I played another game in the system with that manual. Then more recently I decided to give a try to the full system with Hoplite, which represents warfare in the ancient times, and warfare representing this specific type of infantry unit, the hoplites, which has its own limitations, its own strengths. Tough, packs a punch when it first hits, is not particularly agile, not particularly mobile. And the system, I would say, really captures well all of the unique factors that hoplite infantry presented in ancient times. A lot of scenarios, a lot of different things. Again, it's a very high value package. I like how GMT, when it comes out with one of these games, does not just present you with 1 or 2 battles, but there are a lot of maps, a lot of scenarios. Within each scenario, a lot of different ways of playing it. And Outlet is not only a great game per se, from what I heard from other people that played Great Battles of History before, this is also a vast improvement on previous games. Because gamers, even those that like the system very much, complained about the system of activation of the units that seemed to be too artificial and too gamey. Now, we have a system which is gamey and artificial, but it feels right. It's one of those things that does not look very, I could say, natural. But I don't know what in wargaming really does. But it seems to capture abstractly the essence of the events, or the flow of the events, or the essence of warfare, in particular the aspect of warfare which is unpredictable. Fog of war, attrition, unpredictability, all of these things are captured very well when you activate units thanks to a chit pull mechanic, which is common to many games. It is used here, it has been added to the Great Battles of History system in this game. You pull chits from a cup to determine which groups of units will activate, but there are wrinkles to it because there is a special chit that allows you to try to activate a group twice. You can push your luck and try to steal the initiative from an opponent. If you do so, then you're trumping the initiative of the opponent. The opponent that should activate does not activate, and you get to activate one of your groups. If not, you get a penalty. So, on one hand, the chit pool system adds a lot of unpredictability and chaos and randomness, but without making the game completely meaningless, giving you enough unpredictability that presents you with a challenge, and you have to figure out how to react to that constantly. Your best laid plans need to be revised and redesigned constantly, but at the same time, the overall narrative, the overall structure of the story is not completely distorted, does not lose its general profile. So you have the general flow of the battle, but you are working towards the progression of the battle in a creative and exciting way. So Hoplite was a great game, and if you played Great Battles of History before and didn't like the activation system, know that now that has been fixed. I love games where you pull chits from a cup to activate your units, so definitely this is a game that I liked very much. Hoplite by GMT. We're still in GMT land, and this time we're talking about Fire in the Lake, a game about the Vietnam War. A game that deals with counterinsurgency. It is indeed the new title in the COIN counterinsurgency system. It is a game that, even more than when you're pulling chits from a cup, is abstract. It's incredibly abstract. But again, this is abstraction that makes sense. Abstraction that clearly is based on scholarship, that clearly is based on deep interest for the topic. And abstraction that creates a model for historical events which are of astounding, mind-boggling complexity. It is the war in Vietnam. It is the Vietnam War with the four main factions that are struggling to pursue their objectives, which are not the same. Completely non-symmetrical gameplay. And gameplay which is possibly the least intuitive gameplay that I've played in a long time. When you read a manual of a game, usually you have a sense of what then is going to happen in the game. Here you memorize the rules and the procedures, so you have no idea how they're going to get together, how action A and B will allow you to pursue objective C, how to combine the actions. It just feels like completely another planet. Then when you start playing the game and you start seeing how the things go together, the game reveals itself gradually, and the tightness of the design emerges. Then you have a fantastically immersive experience. Then you reveal a system that, yes, on the surface appears very abstract, but then in reality manages to capture a lot of history. Then all of the political factors, all of the historical factors, then social aspects, military aspects, all play into it. All the four factions have to face the challenges that their historical counterparts were facing historically, from the United States Army that has a lot of firepower, packs a big punch, but has all sorts of logistical problems and also is not very beloved by all of the population. You have the Viet Cong units, which are not very powerful but have all sorts of other advantages because of the unconventional guerrilla warfare that they're pursuing. So there. I don't play many games about the Vietnam War. I'm somewhat suspicious about games that have the ambition of managing to portray the entire event at the strategic level and taking politics and everything else into account. I'm glad that I moved past my suspicions, or my skepticism I should say, and I try Find the Lake because this is a phenomenal game. I taught a couple of classes about Vietnam in my class about warfare last semester. I wish I'd been able to play this game. I don't know that I can play with undergraduate students because the level of complexity and the investment that it takes is still quite a bit, but I don't know, I wish I could, maybe in the future. From a game that is pretty complex but pretty abstract, we move on to a game that is still pretty abstract. Maybe I would say this is one of the red threads of this year. There have been some remarkable games that made a lot of generic abstractions, and yet somehow they did that well. They did manage to give minimalistic representations of complex events. I talked about Holdfast, I talked about Find the Lake, and now the next in my hit parade is Quartermaster General. Quartermaster General is a war game that maybe you wouldn't even qualify as a war game, but remember my definition, and I stand by my definition and I agree with it. It's my, after all. A war game that when I play it, a war game is a game that when I play it feels like I'm playing a war game. Quartermaster General is a game that depicts World War II at the strategic level, the entire event with multiplayer, multi-party. You can have a certain amount of players with one nation per player. You can distribute the nations differently. But you have it all. You have the Pacific, you have North Africa, you have Europe, you have Eastern Europe. You have all of it playable in an evening, and you can teach it in 20 minutes. What? This is usually what you can achieve with monster games that take forever to teach. You're old before you learn how to play the game, before you even start. You're going to be considerably older before you complete the game. Maybe you, at some point, you're like, what game were I playing here? We started playing it in the 90s. I don't remember. That's how long they take. Here, in an evening, you have the entire war. How? All resolved through card play. It's a card-driven game. Each player has his or her own deck of cards which represent military resources, possible events, defenses, and you are trying to manipulate your hand and the cards that are left there, because when you're left without cards, that's it. It's really bad. Your resources are out. And the thickness of the deck, the number of cards, the composition of the cards is what makes the game tick. The designer could have given you a rulebook this big and then a game without cards at all, but the designer did all the work for you. All of the historical wrinkles and factors have been miniaturized and placed like microchips in the cards. The cards do all the work. The cards create history for you. It's almost preternatural what happens when you're playing the game. You're just a card that says this is Stalingrad. The entire Stalingrad campaign is represented by a single card, and you play it and you resolve it and you're like, well, that's it. But then when this starts happening consistently, you realize that actually things are going roughly along historical lines, that the players are facing the challenges that their historical counterparts were facing historically. Germans always seem to be almost right there at the gates of Moscow, and it's quite hard to actually get there. Sometimes it looks like they have defeated all of the Soviet units, but these Soviet units keep coming back from the woodwork. The Japanese have apparently a big punch that they pack early on in the game, and they're able to grab lands and to control things in the Pacific, but they are very vulnerable in terms of resources. If the United States managed to effectively island hope close enough to start bombing Japan, then the infrastructure of Japan collapses, and Japan is very vulnerable to being left without resources. Something similar happens to Italy, that also has a fairly thin deck. And so the United States will be faced with a lot of work to do, because they have to slow down the expansionism of Japan in the Pacific. Then at some point they will probably want to redirect their efforts towards Europe to lend a hand to Britain. It's there. I mean, it's all of World War II without you having to worry about a million rules. You can simply learn the very simple rules, and as I said, the cards do it for you, but the cards do not dictate gameplay. They can be used in a variety of ways, and from game to game you will end up using different cards in different ways, with a lot of possible combinations, a lot of possible options to explore. Quartermaster General is a miracle in distillation. Even more so than Holdfast, that already did that incredibly for a campaign of World War II. This one does it for the entire World War II. Pretty impressive achievement. Now we go towards the top half of my list, and I realized something, that I guess that I really like these games that abstract a lot, but I may have this masochistic side of me in which I still seem to prefer very detailed games that are sometimes a pain to learn and sometimes take very long to resolve, because I realize that on top of the game, of the list, there is that type of game more often than not. I guess that at the end you invest a lot, but if the game is good, you do get monster resources, monster returns from that. And the next, which is number 5 in my list, is Empire of the Sun, a game that did come out a couple of years ago. It is not a classic, but it is only a classic among seasoned grognard. I almost said grognard. Why did I say so? I don't know, I guess that since I became an American citizen, I started using the most common pronunciation. Grognard, the most seasoned wargamers would have the strength and stamina to sink their teeth into this manual, which is completely counterintuitive, meaning that there are a lot of concepts that are different, a lot of things like movement and attacks and interceptions that are handled differently from the way in which you would expect a game about the Pacific Warfare to handle them. Yes, this is a game about the Pacific Warfare, the strategic level, card driven, with a million of different effects and surprises that will happen because of card play and the way in which that can be manipulated. It takes more work, the Quartermaster General, just to learn, and indeed I waited to learn this game until I had a period in which I had some extra time. I could devote myself to learn this. It's not a game that is for the faint of the heart at all. If you manage to put in the effort and then you play the game, which also takes quite a while, this is a monster game with a great level of detail, with a great level of immersion. Definitely a very immersive experience. A lot more work, but this is to me probably one of the textbook cases of considerable effort to learn a game and considerable payoff in terms of the experience, the richness, the reward that you get from playing the game. Similar but considerably less taxing, considerably less demanding is number 4. It's not a monster game. You see, the monster games tend to be towards the top of the list I get. You know, monstrous. Dark Valley by GMT. Is this a monster game? I don't know. It's an introductory to monster games, a mini monster. More than a mini monster, less than a monster, something like a monstrito or a monstrillo, a meaty monster, whatever. It is more than a game that you play in an evening. If you're playing the full campaign, it has a larger map, it has a large number of counters, but the rule book is more manageable than you have in many other games on the subject, which is yet again the Barbarossa campaign. I complain about, oh, games that always depict the same thing, Battle of the Bulge, Barbarossa, but maybe there is a reason. Maybe these campaigns are indeed pretty exciting. You hear this noise? It's just the people that are remodeling my basement, turning into a gamer cave. There is another video in which I'm giving you an update of what's happening around my house in early 2015, if you're curious about the gamer cave, which is coming. The Dark Valley! The Dark Valley! What does it do? It portrays Barbarossa campaign in short scenarios if you want to play those, but of course you will want to play the big thing. I mean, if you're playing a game that can give you the full campaign, that's probably what you want to experience. With cheat pool. With cheat pool mechanics, again, always a plus. In particular here it is fun that the logistics of the campaign, which are of course very important, a key element if you want to give the chrome the flavor of the campaign, is handled through the pull of a logistics cheat from the cup. Instead of giving you this sort of like gamey situation, yeah, you cut my supply lines, but I know I have until the end of the turn to try to restore them. Is that what happened to people historically? What happened to people historically is that when the supply lines were cut, they were just rushing in terror to try to restore supply lines. And you will do this on a smaller scale, of course, because you do not know what logistics are going to be checked next time. Overall, everything else in the system is still pretty manageable, more manageable than you find in the average monster. It could really be an introduction to monster games, more demanding than your average war game, but still a very, very, very good ratio that you have here between the complexity of the rules, which is not daunting, and the breadth and scope of the game. Then we have a tactical game, which is one of the few truly tactical games that I really enjoy this year that enters this category here, and that is Warfighter. Number 3 is Warfighter by DVG Games. It is a variation more than a reiteration of concepts that you have seen in other games by DVG. One of the things that you see a lot in DVG games is cards that represent units and that have a mini table that give you the target number that you're trying to exceed after you have modifiers to resolve combat, which is very convenient. So all the combat tables are right there where you need them to be as you're staying at the unit for which you're resolving combat instead of having to go and look around for combat tables, modifiers. Everything is right there, which makes the experience more immersive because you can concentrate on what's happening in the world depicted by the game as opposed to working too much about making the mechanics work. Warfighter depicts man-to-man combat in the modern world at the tactical level. That's usually what happens with man-to-man, and you have different opponents that your soldiers will face. It can be drug cartels in South America, it can be insurgents in the Middle East, or it can be military forces of the Middle East. It's very abstract, it's basically a card game, but it does have a board. That means it also has a spatial aspect. Indeed, the players are trying to move along a track where the locations are represented by cards, which the players have to look for. That was noisy. Which the players have to look for, and that means, of course, that you have to work to manipulate your deck to get to the cards that you need to go. And if you're spending actions to look for that, for the next location, then you're spending less action to deal with the trouble that's happening around you. It's a fully cooperative game because the forces of the opponents are controlled by the AI of the board, so fully cooperative, perfectly friendly to the solitaire gamer, with a lot of elements to discover, a lot of customization. You can try with different soldiers each time, you can try with different equipment, different missions, and even with the same group of people and the same equipment, just given the different way in which the events will present themselves throughout the game will give you a different experience. huge replay value. Number 2, Crusade and Revolution by Compass Games. This is a publisher by which I do not play many games. I don't know why exactly, but Crusade and Revolution. Crusade and Revolution is a card-driven game on a point-to-point map, not my favorite type of map, but I've noticed that somehow this type of map seems to work well, at least to often go together with card-driven games. This is a card-driven game in the, I would say, traditional sense, like you have, say, in Empire of the Sun, in a sense, or Paths of Glory, this type of thing in which you will gain resources from the cards. And it's not that, oh, it's a bad idea because it has been done before. It's all a matter of how that is handled. And here the cards for the 2 sides have been divided in 3 ages, from the War of the Columns all the way to the War of the Armies. Resources are different as the armies are organizing themselves and trying to become stronger and to pursue their objectives, to unlock certain possibilities, to do things later. I would say that the engine, the card-driven engine of the game, has been handled very well. Definitely it works smoothly, it presents you with choices, challenges, limitations of resources, but not to the point in which you feel you cannot do anything, but to the point in which you're presented with the interesting challenge of having limited resources to accomplish a lot of different things. Crusade Revolution portrays the Spanish Civil War, so we have the 2 sides, the Republicans and the Nationalists, and they play in completely different ways. And the flow of the game is interesting because it's just so packed with historical detail. The Nationalists have to deal with a lot of challenges that they had. They had to connect the Northern Front and the Southern Front to get to lift a penalty that they have about shortage of ammo. They have areas that they are in which they're sieged. There are areas that they are sieging. The Republicans have to defend themselves against the waves of better organized and stronger nationalists. They have to recruit new people. They have to try to defend their locations. They have to prevent their morale from collapsing entirely, which is what will lead to their defeat in the game and in the war. It's a very good game. I enjoyed playing the Spanish Civil War by GMT a couple of years ago, and I enjoyed the game very well. If I had to choose, I don't know, actually they don't feel very different, they don't feel very similar, so I don't know that even a comparison is in order. But I definitely like how this game, better than GMT's The Spanish Civil War, does give you a lot of historical chrome, a ton of historical flavor, an astounding amount of historical challenges, again all factored in very well through the cards. So the political alliances that you make from other countries, with other countries, the resources that you receive, the weapons, organization of your army, the leaders, all has been taken care of. I believe actually another one of the red threads towards my top 10 this year is card-driven games that has been designed well and in which history has been hardwired into the system of the cards. In this, there's a similarity between Crusade and Revolution and Quartermaster General. Crusade and Revolution is, to me, superior as a design, as a war game, because of the immense amount of historicity, of period feel that you get from this game. On top, of course, of being not just an historical simulation that you could just read a history book, but being an incredibly engaging game in which the sides are presented with different challenges, they work in different ways, they have different strengths, and they have different objectives, different ways in which they have to go about it. On a point-to-point map, you always have a little bit of the risk that it will turn out like being a game of Go on a map. That's sometimes what I've seen in a game that I like very much, which is Washington's War. In this game, I don't have that much of a sense. There are enough connections between the locations, but of course you're trying to encircle the opponent, to break the fronts, to prevent the opponent from isolating your units. but the overall flow of the action, of the expansion of the movement and the formation of the fronts felt more organic, felt less abstract, felt less gamey, more historically interesting and more historically based. Crusade and Revolution. Spanish Civil War is a topic that is not gamed much. I'm glad when there is a game that covers the topic, when it does it at the strategic level, which is a challenge, and especially I'm happy when it does it with this level of quality. Now, number one. If you watched my videos recently, this will not probably shock you, like, oh my gosh, I had no idea I like that game. If just I tell you that I did play a game of this game that lasted over 40 hours, that already tells you how much I liked it, because I wouldn't play for so long a game that I just kinda like or that is just good. I need to be in love with a design to devote so much time to it, and I am in love with this design, and I devoted so much time. It wasn't a single session. I slept between sessions. I ate. Well, I was just playing an hour here, an hour there, and I left the game set up on my metal wall, playing it with maps attached to the wall with magnets, and the units being held by magnetic counters. The game is Unconditional Surrender by GMT, best war game of 2014. One of the best war games that they played ever, and possibly, most likely, my desert island game. You know, the philosophical abstract problem. If you went on a desert island and you could only bring one game, it probably will be Unconditional Surrender, because of the enormous quality and excitement of gameplay, and because of the endless replay value. This is indeed a game that maybe I will not play every day, but if I had to think of a game that I think will never end revealing itself, will never end showing new aspects, new strategies, new possibilities, this is it. Unconditional Surrender depicts World War II. Whoa, what a new topic. Uncharted territory there. Fine. We have seen this before, but done in this way, this is fantastic. This is not a mini monster like Dark Valley. Is a monster, but a lean monster. Only 50 pages of rules, which of course would scare most non-war gamers. Even war gamers would be like, I don't know, over 30 I don't feel all that comfortable. But monster gamers are like, only 50 to have strategic depiction of World War II that takes into account the military, the logistics, the political aspects, diplomacy, espionage, partisans, strategic warfare, bombing, naval warfare, submarine warfare, everything. Then yes, then 50 pages is really not much. And these 50 pages of rules are well written, and there is a lot of redundancy, which is not a which is not a mistake. It's not a flaw in the design. It's not bad editing. It is just that there are a lot of different elements of the war that have been depicted through similar mechanics. So once you learn a couple of mechanics here, how to add together modifiers, how to use the tables, then a lot of different aspects of the war actually are resolved through variations of that system, which is a huge relief from learning how to resolve air combat in one way, then close that in a box, store it on a shelf. Now we have to learn how to resolve things with infantry. Done. Oh, tanks, that's a completely different combat system. You have one unified combat system to resolve all forms of combat and even strategic warfare, which is how, say, bombing or controlling key locations on the map will affect the overall economy on the opponent. This is a game that depicts World War II at the strategic level in Europe only, but you already have enough room here to experiment with an incredible variety of things. You can try different strategies. It's unbelievable how the game is perfectly solitaire friendly. You can play it solo, and it even takes into account things that usually are not solvable, such as diplomacy, and that is resolved how? Jet pool. Always the holy grail of designs for me. And you can just try to rewrite history. And there's been so much work in attuning the design to the historical events, or I would say to the historical potential behind the historical events, that even when we are trying completely fantastic what-if scenarios, you have the sense that you haven't stepped into a completely fantasy world. You're not gonna see Jon Snow and the Night Watch in Stalingrad. It is a variant, a what-if scenario that somehow makes sense, somehow has plausibility. Which of course is enormously rewarding, it's enormously exciting. You're seeing history from a different perspective. I like playing fantasy games all the time, but when I'm not playing those, I'm playing history, I like to see what could have been reliably or plausibly. And the game lets you do this all the time. I could spend all day talking about the game in more detail, and I don't think I'll even get you really close to really get a sense of the epic depth of this game. All the most remarkable because you reach this level of epic depth without having to obsess on a million exceptions, sub-rules, and sub-rules to the rules, or the exceptions of the rules of the sub-rule. Everything is extremely elegant. Elegance is one of the keywords that I would use to describe this design. In a nutshell, in a single expression, this game is World War II in a box, and it is not a big box. And I think this is no small accomplishment. Unconditional Surrender, masterpiece. I think this is really classic. It became a classic after half an hour that I was playing it. It was a classic for this guy here. I think this will just become a classic in wargaming. If we were back to the golden age of wargaming, there would be articles coming out in the wargame magazines about new strategies, about new things. Maybe, hopefully, I think new issues of C3I will cover this. C3I being the magazine that talks as devoted to GMT games, but I think back in the day, we wouldn't have just we couldn't have shut up about this. We would have talked about this constantly in all possible wargaming venues, and maybe this is what will happen here. Not for everybody, it is a monster game. There are smaller scenarios that you can play, and I think those are exciting too. I haven't played them, because I just love the epic scope, but all that I've heard about people playing smaller scenarios is that they found them extremely exciting and rewarding. If you are looking for World War II in a box and not a big box, if you never played a monster game because you were scared and you want to give a try to one that is learnable, playable, and immensely rewarding, Unconditional Surrender, I think this really is going to be a modern classic. If you go back and look and watch my best of the last years, of course I'm always excited when I get to number one, but I think this is the most excited that I've been. This is the most revolutionary, the most groundbreaking game. It's just not a fantastic game itself, it's like a foundation of something. I love it, I love it, I love it. Unconditional Surrender by GMT. I could talk about all day, and I said not achieve much, not to give you a sense of what it is, so I can just stop here for now. Woo! Thank you for being with me in this long cavalcade in which I had to take a break because indeed the memory of the camera was full. I had to tweak things around a little bit to be able to record more of my ramblings, of my memories, of my excitement about this fantastic hobby of ours. The hobby of gaming, which is phenomenal, and the niche within the hobby of wargaming. This strange small world for slightly obsessed, compulsive people with, not always with a small ego, we'll put it that way. I think that's a fair characterization of wargamers. People that love history, people that love to understand how things went and could have been, people that are invested in heavy designers. This is wargamers, this is wargaming. I hope with my videos in the past and with this video here to be able to give you some general indications, some pointers about games that you may enjoy. If nothing else, at least I get to express my enormous love for this hobby because, as you can see, it's so burning in me that if I don't let it out, I'm just gonna burst into flames. So thank you for letting me vent. Thank you for letting me express my love. I hope you had a great 2014 of wargaming, and I hope that 2015 will be full of happiness, joy, and wargames too. All for today. Ciao from Michael.